helps us understand what he's really dealing with. That he's trying to calm down and he's choosing that road before surgery. It's a smart thing to do, even if he's missing a couple slams.
Carlos Alcaraz's right wrist didn't just snap, it was destroyed. It was systematically ruined by the overcrowded schedule his father built. And now, Juan Carlos Ferrero has finally revealed the truth. Listen closely. This isn't just a routine sports injury. This is a catastrophic, career-threatening disaster. When the devastating news broke that Alcaraz was forced into an immobilizing cast, pulling out of Roland Garros and abandoning his Wimbledon defense, the tennis world went completely numb. The reigning champion sidelined, the most explosive athlete of his generation, entirely neutralized. The media immediately began hunting for a clean, safe excuse. They blamed the heavy tennis balls. They blamed bad luck. They blamed the brutal friction of the clay courts. They lied to you. Juan Carlos Ferrero just pulled back the curtain, and he didn't hold back. He bypassed the corporate public relations shields and pointed his finger directly at the real culprit, a brutal, unyielding, hyper-aggressive calendar that was intentionally designed to run Carlos into the ground. A calendar curated not by corporate sponsors, but by his own father, Carlos Alcaraz Gonzalez. Think about the high stakes here. We are talking about a 23-year-old phenom with 7 Grand Slams tracking toward immortality. But behind the scenes, a fierce, silent war was being waged for his physical survival. On one side, Ferrero, a former world number 1 who knows exactly how the tour breaks human bodies, screaming for rest. On the other side, a traditional, old-school father driving an operational strategy that treated a human being like an unstoppable machine. The math is staggering. Look at what happened leading up to the collapse. South American clay in the freezing February damp. Extreme hard-court transitions in the Middle East. High-intensity, back-to-back Masters 1,000 brackets in Indian Wells and Miami. Zero decompression, zero recovery. No time for the tendons to heal. Just endless flights, endless matches, and endless pressure. Why? Because when you are the hottest ticket in global sports, appearance fees turn into millions of dollars per day. Promoters demand your presence. Exhibition matches dangle fortunes for just a weekend of work. The father built a schedule for an Ironman, but the human wrist doesn't care about market value. When Alcaraz hits that lethal, hyper-accelerated forehand, the torque on his wrist joint is violent. It requires absolute structural perfection. If you inject relentless fatigue into that equation, the microscopic tears build up silently. The joint destabilizes, the cartilage frays. Ferrero saw the trap, he warned them. He repeatedly demanded a lean, hyper-focused calendar to protect Carlos's joints for the majors. He was overridden. The consequence? A sudden, violent snap in Barcelona, a season in ruins, and Jannik Sinner completely unchecked at the absolute top of the world. This isn't a temporary setback, it is a terrifying glimpse into a fractured camp where the coach's warnings were ignored until the bone gave out. The breaking point has arrived. The damage is done. Let's look at the cold, hard data. The human body is a biological machine. It operates under the laws of physics. When Carlos Alcaraz steps onto a tennis court, his right forearm undergoes more violent acceleration than almost any athlete in history. His signature forehand relies on an extreme semi-western grip, a rapid whipping motion of the wrist, and a brutal contact point that generates over 3,000 revolutions per minute. To survive that kind of kinetic trauma, the wrist needs one thing above all else: recovery. Instead, he was handed a death sentence disguised as a tournament calendar. The strategy driven by Carlos Alcaraz Gonzalez was relentless. Look at the timeline leading up to the structural failure. It wasn't just that Carlos was playing tournaments, it was the types of tournaments and the sudden, chaotic surface changes. Most elite players analyze the calendar like a chessboard. They skip smaller events to save their joints for the Grand Slams. But Team Alcaraz's operational blueprint looked like a corporate expansion plan. Right after a grueling, physical hard-court swing, instead of taking a mandatory 3-week block for strength conditioning and joint decompression, Carlos was booked for high-stress exhibition matches in non-traditional markets. These aren't casual practice sessions. These are high-stakes, highly televised events where promoters pay millions of dollars to see the explosive Alcaraz brand at 100% capacity. You can't coast, you can't hold back, You have to fly across multiple time zones, change climates overnight, and hit full-power forehands on untested temporary indoor courts. Juan Carlos Ferrero watched this happen with growing horror. Ferrero isn't just an observer. He is a man who conquered the ATP Tour himself. He knows exactly how the grind works. He knows that the moment an athlete's sleep cycles are disrupted by constant travel, their muscle-firing patterns slow down by milliseconds. And in elite tennis, a millisecond of delayed stabilization means the load shifts from the large muscles of the shoulder and back directly onto the tiny, fragile ligaments of the wrist. Ferrero didn't keep quiet. Inside the academy walls in Villena, the tension was palpable. Behind closed doors, Ferrero was staging high-stakes interventions. He presented concrete training data to the inner circle. He showed how Carlos's grip strength was dropping after every back-to-back tournament. He pointed out the subtle changes in Carlos's technical form, how he was slightly late on the ball because his forearm extensors were completely locked up with chronic fatigue. The warning was clear. If you don't pull him out of the upcoming clay court warm-ups, something is going to snap. But the momentum of the Alcaraz machine was too fast to stop. The commercial pressure was immense. When you are 23 years old, holding 7 Grand Slam titles, you feel completely invincible. You believe your body can heal overnight. Carlos wanted to play. His father, raised in an era where playing through pain was a badge of honor, believed that competitive match play was the best way to keep a player sharp. They mistook temporary physical youth for permanent structural immunity. Then came the European clay court swing, the most punishing stretch of the year for a tennis player's wrist. Clay tennis balls are inherently heavier. When the courts get damp, those balls absorb moisture and turn into heavy, abrasive stones. Hitting high-velocity topspin against a heavy, slow ball on clay requires double the wrist snap compared to a fast, hard court. It is a mechanical nightmare for an already inflamed tendon. By the time Carlos arrived in Barcelona, the micro tears were already deep inside the joint. He was playing on borrowed time. During practice sessions, Ferrero was reportedly monitoring every single strike, visibly tense in the player box. Carlos was using heavy therapeutic tape, trying to numb the dull ache that had started creeping up his forearm. They were treating the symptom while completely ignoring the cause. The catastrophic moment didn't happen during a flashy, high-profile rally. It happened on an ordinary, mid-match ball. Carlos went to whip a heavy, cross-court forehand against a deep, heavy ball. His positioning was slightly off due to absolute physical exhaustion. His wrist took the entire, unmitigated force of the impact. A sharp, sickening sensation. A sudden loss of racket head control. The champion looked down at his right hand, and the color completely drained from his face. The match wasn't just lost, his entire season was instantly thrown into a tailspin. The immediate medical diagnosis confirmed Ferrero's worst nightmare, significant structural damage to the right wrist ligaments, requiring immediate, total immobilization. No tennis, no training, just a heavy, rigid cast and months of forced, agonizing silence. This is the raw reality of the split inside Team Alcaraz. It wasn't a lack of talent, it wasn't a tactical failure. It was a structural collapse caused by a calendar that treated a human being like a piece of high-yielding real estate. Ferrero had the map to longevity, but the father held the keys to the vehicle. The diagnosis changed everything inside the Alcaraz camp. It wasn't just a medical crisis, it was a total breakdown of organizational trust. Juan Carlos Ferrero's private warnings had transformed into undeniable, catastrophic reality. The heavy, rigid cast surrounding Carlos's right wrist was proof that you cannot outrun structural physics, no matter how much talent you possess. The immediate fallout behind closed doors was intense. Ferrero didn't mince words. He demanded an absolute, non-negotiable overhaul of the management structure. The era of chasing massive exhibition paychecks in the middle of a grueling season had to end. If Carlos wanted a career that lasted 15 years instead of 5, the calendar had to be stripped down to its bare essentials. The father's traditional mindset of more matches equals more sharpness had to bow to modern sports science. They had to learn the hard way that longevity isn't given, it is actively protected. While Jannik Sinner continues to hoard trophies and solidify his grip on the world #1 ranking, Carlos is left watching from the sidelines. discovering the bitter taste of missed opportunities and forced stagnation. But this injury might ultimately save Carlos Alcaraz's career. It has forced a highly necessary, high-stakes correction before the structural damage became completely permanent. True champions are not defined by how fast they run into the ground, but by how intelligently they adapt when the ground gives way beneath them. The Alcaraz machine is resetting, and the next chapter will look radically different. Look at your own feed today. Count how many videos praise an athlete's insane grind versus how many analyze their structural survival. The internet loves the burnout until the bone snaps. Drop a comment below. Who do you think holds the ultimate responsibility when a young prodigy breaks down? The family driving the dream, or the coach trying to manage the reality? Let's talk facts in the comments.